Good morning, everybody. It is October 5th. It is 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'd like to call to order the meeting for the Finance Committee. Director Auston, can you do the roll call, please?
Certainly. Trustee Fishman.
Here.
Trustee O'Keefe.
Here.
Trustee Riddle.
Present.
Trustee Sommer.
Here.
And Trustee McDonald.
Here.
I see that we're also joined by Trustee Wolf, and I'm Anthony Auston, Director of the Library. I'm joined by Finance Manager John Risco, and I see that we have two others on our call here. I see Mary Lawler and Elizabeth Seeger.
All right. I would like to move to the second piece of the agenda, which is the public comment section, and ask if there is anyone from the public that would wish to address the Board of Trustees today. Please do.
I would like to address the board or the committee.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
All right. I guess questions that I'm hoping will be answered in this meeting or in the next meeting. But I guess just the one sheet on the levy that was in the packet, I couldn't understand from that how the levy was derived, how the levy was you came up with the levy. And I'm hoping that will be explained and not just be happy that it's a flat levy or that the library is only X% of your total tax bill. Those to me are not explanations for this particular levy. And I mean, there was some modeling done for the July board meeting on a potential levy. In that case, the modeling was a levy to the tax cap. This is a flat one, so it's lower than that. And I guess I'm hoping that there will be modeling for this levy. And also, why this levy? Why not a decrease, for example? Why not an increase? Why, and I'm not saying I'm not a proponent of either an increase or a decrease. I'm a proponent of trying to understand how you got to this levy. And I'm hoping that will be explained. So that is mainly what I'm looking for. And also the sheet clearly shows that you're not levying for all your expenses, at least for the 2021-22 budget. And this levy is really funding the following fiscal year, 2022 to 23. So, and presumably your expenses are going to go up. So this levy isn't enough for this budget. I guess I want to see how are you coming up with your shortfall? And I understand you have a significant general reserve, a general fund reserve. But I guess how is this going to work for the following years? And I'm interested in both, not overtaxing the residents, but also making sure the library is in good financial position for years to come. Okay, so thank you. And I just want to also point out I was speaking individually and not on behalf of any organization of which I am a part. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
And I appreciate you all for your service.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any other comments or questions from anybody attending for today? Okay. So we can go on to the next. The next item on the agenda is review of the draft of the minutes from the meeting from June 9th for the Finance Committee. Are there any comments or questions on the minutes? All right. If there are no comments or questions, we have a motion to approve the minutes from the last
I
meeting?
move that the minutes from the last meeting be approved.
I will second.
All right.
Joan Fishman,
The,
trustee Fishman,
Okay.
second.
so the minutes have been motion to approve by Lisa and seconded by trustee McDonald and seconded by trustee Fishman. All right, to the next item, there are no presentation or action items. So we'll move to the proposed tax levy for 2021.
Okay,
And
so
that
let's,
will
We need to
go,
vote on
We
it.
need to
Anthony.
vote.
We need to
Oh,
vote.
I apologize. Sorry, jumping ahead a little bit.
all right,
Can we do a roll call, please,
yes.
on the minutes?
Trustee Fishman,
Yes.
trustee O'Keefe,
Yes.
trustee Riddle,
Yes. Yes.
trustee McDonald,
Yes.
and trustee Sommer.
Yes.
All right,
My apologies for jumping ahead there. And I believe now, since that has been approved, we can go to item number 6. There are no presentations, there are no action items. So item number 6 is the discussion items, which is the proposed levy for tax year 2021. And Anthony, I believe you will take it away.
certainly. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here. I want to make sure everyone can see the PDF documents that I've got up on my screen to help illustrate our conversation today. So I've got the agenda up here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I've got a handful of documents that I want to share with you. We've just approved our minutes. There is this document, this one-page document showing last year's final levy, our proposed levy, and our approved budget for this fiscal year. But before we get to that document, I'd like to provide a little bit more background information and talk a bit about how we got to where we are today. And there are a couple documents that we're going to go over to help to illustrate that. I also want the record to reflect that trustee Nealon has just arrived to our call as well. And she's here to see our meeting as well. All right, so the first step I think that I'd like for us to do is to look at this document that we've seen the last couple of years. And this is a retrospective summary of our financial information and our tax levy data for the past several fiscal years. So going back to fiscal year 13, you can see this document illustrates what our fund balances are for our general fund, our special funds, our special reserve fund, et cetera. And is also reflecting what our baseline tax levy was, the cumulative number for our tax levy. And the numbers that are before that reflect the increase and decrease in the levies. So you can see that we had some trending there in fiscal year 14. We had raised our levy by CPI. We had a small increase then again in 15. We held it flat in 16. The board elected to do a reduction in the levy by 2.5% in 17, 5.5% in 18, and we have held our levy flat at that exact same ask in our tax levy ever since. And that is what we're proposing in this document here today. So the general fund balance for the current fiscal year, you can see we don't have 21 listed on this particular document because we don't have our actual audited financials in front of us yet. However, we are currently in the process of receiving the audit. We expect to have presentation of the audit at our October 19th meeting. So we'll be able to fill in this chart and update this document for you all for the next board meeting that we have. So basically, when explaining where we're at right now, this is our snapshot picture of what our fund balances are. And there's some trending that you can see here that our general fund balance has gone up and that our special reserve fund balance, well, has also appeared to go up in this particular document. However, we know that we're in the middle of a construction project right now and that the special reserve fund is going to see some decreases here. The budget for that project, just so that you all know, was about 1.8 million. And so that is going to be a difference that we're going to see there. One of the other topics that we'll likely be discussing here with the receipt of the audit is the discussion of our approved fund balance policy that we had reviewed back in March of this year, had approved rather back in March of this year, which reflects that we want to keep a general fund balance of 1 year of our operating revenue or less in that general fund. So it is entirely likely that in order for us to be in compliance with that policy, we may be directed by the auditors to make a transfer from our general fund to our special reserve fund in an effort to help true that up. So that may make some of the difference in that special reserve fund expenditures that we've had for this year. This is our snapshot. So I guess I wanted to make sure that everyone on the committee felt comfortable with this information and how to understand this before we move forward and talk a little bit about the modeling document that we had received from our public finance consultant earlier this year, where we were looking at our current fiscal years, looking back a couple, as well as moving forward about 20 years to see what the impact of some of the decisions are that we make here going forward. So any questions about the document that you're looking at in front of you here right now? And I will say, Tracy, John, if you want to interrupt me and add anything to this narrative discussion here today, by all means, please do pipe in. Okay, so to get a picture of where our financial, where our status is on our fund balances right now, without the audit, we can look at our fund balance from last month's board meeting, which is showing.
Anthony, excuse me, Fina had a question, didn't you, Fina?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I will ask it offline. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So to get a picture of where we're at right now in this current fiscal year, if we look back at last month's board packet in the treasurer's report, we can see what our current equity is in what our fund balance is rather for the current fiscal year. So you can see the numbers are fairly consistent with what we were seeing on this previous page. General fund balance sitting around 9 million and the special reserve fund sitting around 6. Okay, so those numbers, again, are fairly consistent with what we're seeing here, 8.6 and 6 on this document as well. All right, so that's our current information. We had, this document may look familiar to you all. This is the document from Andrew Kim, the Director of Public Finance at PMA, who did our presentation earlier this summer, providing that 20-year snapshot for us. And so what we're looking at here right now is actually the levy that is before our community right now was the levy that we had passed in, okay, help me out with this, 2020. And so what we're looking at here is the EAV of the current year is what you're seeing here. And then this is the ask, the total ask that we had for our levy for that year. All right, and what we're discussing now, what would have been a CPI increase, we've held that flat. So we're in fiscal year 22. As we've discussed previously, this would impact our budget for fiscal year 24. And we've got a 0 here. All right, so we're not asking for CPI, we're holding our levy flat. This has an impact for a future budget. And we've discussed that as well. And so if we scroll forward on this document to the general fund, you can see where that would fall in fiscal year 24. It would be this. We're anticipating that our expenditures in that fiscal year are going to be comparable to what we've got as our budget right now, increasing ever so slightly at 5.8 million for our expenditures that year. You can see that there, as he was discussing previously, other sources of revenue may likely be dropping. We're noticing quite a dip in our investment income, but all the other lines essentially modeled as we had previously discussed. We could scroll this out and we could take it out 20 years and we could look at that, but I don't want you all to get distracted by the long range because I think the short term of this, the net effect of holding this flat is fairly nominal for us given the fund balances that we have. And that is a topic that we've discussed and has led us to the flat levies that we've had these last couple of years. I want to pause here right now so that we can take any questions or comments. Tracy, if there's anything that you want to add at this point from what your assessment is. This is kind of the snapshot of where I think I wanted to start our conversation today.
Okay, so this is, I think now you've confirmed, we had a discussion. What we're doing now isn't the 2021, it's 2022 levy. Is that correct? That's what throws me. Okay, we are approving the 2022 levy, which doesn't affect next year, but the following year's receipts. A calendar year, not fiscal year.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Now, our auditor has also explained this to us too. So if you look at last fiscal year's evaluation of our financial statements, this is the audit from Sikich last year. And this section about the property tax calendar can help to illustrate the decisions that we're making and what the timing is. So the annual tax levy ordinance for 2019 that we passed in November of 19 would affect the receipts that we would receive in March of 20, generally ending January of 21. So anything lingering. So it's that whole calendar year. Is this clear as mud?
I think so. I'm going to just speak up. To me, this thing you have up here is more confusing because what we're doing now is the 2022. We are not, even though we are in the fall of 2021, we are approving the 2022 levy. Is that correct?
This is fiscal year 21, 22. In Andrew's document, when you see fiscal year 22, he's referring to the current fiscal year that we're in, which is 21, 22. He always uses the last number at when fiscal year close is. The numbers are confusing, it's true.
You know, I agree, Anthony. I was kind of pretending that it said E, fiscal year end 2022, because I think that's the close of it. That might help, Tracy.
Sure.
And I think he has that in the title, but he just didn't abbreviate. So that cell says fiscal year end June 30th, but he just puts FY. So if that helps, FYE.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good observation, Fina. I think we can ask Andrew to add even just that little E on there, and that would help us to be more clear about what that time frame is.
I don't have any questions. Does anyone else have any questions on this document? And I actually pulled my change. I mean, the big change is that originally, instead of, maybe you mentioned this, I apologize. He had a CPI of 3.5, which now we've gone with the assumption of 0. Is that correct?
So you can see that this is what and actually, you know, he was anticipating that it was going to be 4.9 based upon the data that he's been analyzing. And we said we wanted to be more conservative about that estimate for our modeling, because we didn't anticipate that that was going to be a sustainable CPI. But regardless, we zeroed it out.
Anthony, my questions and trustees, I went through Andrew's report, and my question was more, you know, I am aware that the increase or any increase or decrease impacts our 2024 requests, levy request. But I would like to see some projection either from Andrew or some testing either from Andrew or John. I don't know who could possibly show this, but I would like to just see the breakdown of how it would impact, I think, maybe the next 4 years, if that's okay, an increase or a decrease in the CPI, how it would impact the levy in the next 2 to 4 years. Does that make sense?
It does. And so we can do that with the documents that we have here right now. So this one that shows a 0 in this field, there's a formula that cascades over the entire document. If we compare the document that we have in front of us right now, we can see kind of how this pushes out actually for the duration, for the full 20 years, you can see what the net effect is going to be. And that same is true as we move forward and we look at the general fund impact. You can see that previously we were projecting, and I don't want to get into the weeds too much about looking 20 years into the future, because I think there are so many other things that could impact us, in the coming 20 years. But all else remaining consistent, he is projecting that we are going to be in the red by 23% by 2040 if we hold fast with the same plan that we're going right now. This doesn't concern the library right now. We're not concerned that we're going to go into the red. However, that is, if you follow this model forward right now, that's what you're going to see. Previously, I don't have the document in front of me. I will pull the other document in front of me, but obviously it wasn't escalating downward this quickly. It wasn't going to make it as far as 23.
I have the document in front of me.
Yeah.
This is general fund. Let me find it. No, it was in 20. It was at about 30% of current value, not minus 22. So it would have been at $2.4 million, not negative 1.8. Does that make sense? Oh, can you guys hear me?
I'm trying to pull up his document as well here so that we can see them both on the screen simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, John, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted addressing Fina's question. We did discuss CPI in depth. This is an interesting year. There's concerns about inflation. Year to date is sitting at like 5.3%. We were originally at 4%. I forget what the number was there before, but we really wanted to be conservative with this because there's too many opinions on where we're going as far as inflation. So we did discuss that in depth as far as CPI, where it's going, what it's doing. So just want to let you know.
Thank you. And I'm in agreement. I appreciate that it was kept flat. That was my thought. Those are my thoughts. My thoughts are in line with that. Thank you.
I mean, in a nutshell, the bottom line here is that Wilmette Library has a pretty substantial fund balance right now in our general fund. And what we are proposing with this levy is deficit spending. We think deficit spending is sustainable for a period of time, and Andrew's model accounts for some deficit spending. We also know that there is some variance in terms, as a tax capped entity, the Cook County does take a little bit more. They take, I've got another document. I don't have this scan to put in front of you. This is the county's levy document that I have in front of me here for this current, for 2020, for our 2020 levy. So we asked for 5.91 in our 2020 levy, and the extension is going to be 5.6. So they're going to give us just a little bit more than what we asked for to make up for being tax capped. But there's a lot of variables. There's going to be tax objections. There's a reassessment year that we're looking at here right now. So there are a number of variables that are going to affect that bottom line. But given the fact that we are a little bit more solvent and we have the ability to do some deficit spending responsibly, based on the past trending that we're seeing and looking at the modeling data that we've got here, we feel at least in the short term, and I would say short term would be 5 to 10 years, that the nominal effect of keeping our levy flat at this time is really not substantive. It's immaterial to what our operations are. It's not going to affect our operations. And that, I think, has been demonstrated the pandemic situation notwithstanding. The fact that we have held flat for the past several years has clearly not had an impact to us in terms of our fund balances and in terms of being able to meet our obligations.
Anthony, one thing that I would like to, you said to is, and considering what the questions from Mary Lawler, one thing is, whether we considered decreasing, and it's not something we've talked about. I'm actually very comfortable with keeping it flat, is it something that was considered decreasing the levy, just for argument's sake?
Certainly. I mean, to be quite honest, we did not consider raising it. I didn't model any raising of the levy. That seemed completely unnecessary at this point. Lowering it has certainly been a topic of conversation. We've discussed this when we've had our attorney present at past meetings. And obviously the impact there with reducing the levy would be, we would potentially lose the ability to capture some of the revenues that we've had in years past. Because it would force us to go to referendum if we needed to raise our levy above what CPI is. Whether it's a black box referendum or we actually need to go and do a full ask. That's not a reality for Wilmette Library. It's not going to be a reality for us. I don't think it's necessary. However, what would the impact be if we decided to lower the levy? Given the fact that we have held it flat for the last couple of years, that would be the maximum that we could levy for, would be what we had in 2018, 3 years back, would be the maximum that we could levy without going for a referendum above CPI. So the max, if it was 4.9% above, I'm stumbling here, y'all. I'm sorry. I want to start over. 3 years is, if we look back 3 years, the highest levy is the maximum that we could ever ask for without going for a referendum, right? Okay, so having held our levy flat for the last couple of years, we have now established a new maximum for ourselves. We cannot recapture the revenue that we had in previous levies. So in this document that you're looking at here, if we ever wanted to get back to the levy that we had in 2016, for example, we wouldn't be able to do that without going to taxpayers and asking for permission to do so. And that is why I think we've been more conservative about our efforts, having done this correction in reducing the levy by that like 8% that you're looking at there over 17 and 18. The maximum that we can capture now is what we had in the 2018 levy, which is after we did that 8% reduction. And I think it's for that reason why we have basically decided over the last couple of years that we want to hold fast, that we don't want to reduce this any further at this time, because we might lose ground in a future tax levy. But now that we've effectively held this flat for a couple of years, that target is effectively behind us. You know what I mean? We've got this same number now that we're working off of.
That's very helpful. I think that explaining the 3-year look back is very helpful in why we wouldn't consider dropping it more, because then we are kind of locked in at a certain, again, yeah, I agree.
And to be clear, again, the purpose of the levy is, so Wilmette Library is tax funded. Over 90% of our expenditures are taxpayer funded from this levy. It's our general fund expenditures. All right. So it's the general fund and it's our special funds in terms of our commitment to IMRF, Social Security, and the audit, and then our insurance. So on this document, it's the first 4 items on here are what we would levy for. We do not levy for the special reserve. Special reserve is a separate budget, and that we use exclusively for capital improvements. And we do have a plan. As you know, we've got a 20-year plan for how we're going to be addressing all of our capital needs. And that has been modeled out as part of Andrew's document. But that's not really what's on the table here for discussion today. What we're talking about are our general fund commitments and our special funds. And so that modeling has gone out in Andrew's document as well. And we're assuming a lot of the same for the next couple of years in terms of our operations. There are a few things that I think we can anticipate some changes in the next couple of years. Our staffing being our largest expenditure, approximately 65% of our expenditures are going to staff. We do anticipate that there will be some changes there, but I don't think that that's going to have a huge impact to our overall operations. I don't see our budget going up markedly. And so the deficit spending model that Andrew has presented and that we've been discussing here, I think is sustainable for us for at least the near term.
Can I make a comment? I think that I want to summarize so that I'm clear. So by doing a flat, we are able to operate at a deficit, which will continue to bring our general fund reserve closer. Well, we need to bring it to within the policy. We can do it two ways. One is the deficit spending, and secondly, when and if we determine it's appropriate to transfer funds to the special reserve fund to cover our long-term obligations as shown through the capital study last year. And is that an accurate assumption, accurate statement?
It is. It is. And
Okay.
it's actually it's kind of illustrated on this page that we're looking at right now. So if you look at the chart, find the line on the page kind of in the middle, fiscal year 22, that's where we are. You can see that we are, in fact, there's that number, that 3.75 is kind of the recommendation in an effort to get our fund balance to 100 of our operating revenue.
Okay. Thank you.
And then if we follow that forward on this model, you can see the special reserve fund here for, again, fiscal year 22. You can see that we had some expenditures. This is bridging the two fiscal years. This is our current capital improvement project. That's totaling that 1.89. And then he's showing that there is a deposit, a transfer of that 3.7. And then if we follow this forward, we can see that this is going to fund all of the anticipated expenditures that Ingberg Anderson had for us in that 20-year model, taking us forward. And eventually, as we get further in the plan, if we don't feed our special reserve fund with any potential surplus or any monies that are left over from the general fund in a fiscal year, our special reserve fund would essentially go zero in fiscal year 35. But that's, you know, that's far out. That's not probably a reality. There's a lot of things that would change before then.
Anthony, I think I'm understanding that we could actually model this with a decrease. So when you said that it was discussed, lowering the 3-year average was discussed, we could do that with this spreadsheet, with Andrew's spreadsheet.
We certainly can. We can update this document to reflect that. So what you're seeing right now in the general fund, which is, again, that's the subject of the levy, is the general fund. All else remaining constant, we would go negative by 23% at the end of this 20-year term. We would not have any fund balance. We would have a sincere deficit, a real problem. We would have to go for a referendum way back here in an effort to try to fund our balance. If we don't want it to go below 50%, which I would never recommend it going below 50%, we would need to take some pretty serious action before fiscal year 29, where it starts to dip. Okay, so that's 7 years from now.
And if we were to do that in a nearer term, Anthony, so we'd be able to see I guess what I'm, maybe I need a little bit more time to articulate my question, but
Sure.
I wanted to, maybe I would like to play around with it a little bit more.
Sure, let me, Tracy, do you?
I think
yeah, go
that's
ahead.
helpful. That's helpful.
Athena, are you asking, Anthony, if you go back to the first page, which I think is page 7, are you asking, so instead of keeping it flat in the current year, say we did a decrease, because we'd still have the 3-year look back, which would be just for argument's sake, as an example. And I think Anthony's point is, we certainly could, just for modeling purposes, whether we, just to look, some point we could do that. I think today's proposal is keeping it flat, but it's not something we can't, we could always play with the numbers going ahead. Say we say play ahead for next year or the year after, or we say we look at next year and say let's say next year we do a flat again. we certainly can play with numbers going ahead or.
That's exactly right, because I'm more concerned on the cap that we create each year. We create a cap. This will essentially be the max that like Anthony said, that we would be able to, request that we would be able to levy. And so next year we would need to think of that year plus the previous 2 years as our max. Is that right, Anthony?
Correct.
And so I think that's what I think I'd like to learn a bit more on how to test that,
Okay. Well,
and in order to show the trust.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to speak over you, Fina. I think what we can do here is, I mean, we can certainly ask Andrew to update this document again for us and show a decrease for illustrative purposes. What would happen, we can imagine this, and we can even use our own formulas to play around with this a little bit if we'd like to on our own. He can certainly use the spreadsheet to do it and it'll be easier. But to help you visualize this, the impact of this levy that we're discussing here with this 0 is here in fiscal year 22, affecting the fiscal year 24 budget, holding things flat. If we go forward to look at the general fund, and we look at what we've got here in our general fund right now, we are assuming a transfer. That's another assumption and variable in this conversation. We want to get our fund balance to 100. So today, in an effort to get that to 100, assuming that we've got the appropriate fund balances that allow us to do a transfer, to get it to 100 and be in compliance with our policy, that's the move that we need to take. The caveat is once you move money into your special reserve fund, you cannot take it out for any other purpose. So if whatever move we make there is a final decision, and that money can only be used for special reserve fund purposes, we cannot take it back out to fund any of this deficit that we would potentially have from a levy reduction that we might potentially do. Or if we decide that we want to hold the levy flat for years to come, we wouldn't be able to take money out of the special reserve to account for that difference. A key element that we need to keep in mind as we do this. But if we look at this and we look at the impact of the decision that we make in this fiscal year 22, affecting future budget years, you can see that we are projecting some deficit spending. We are spending down the fund balance. And that by doing that, we are going to find ourselves, even just 7 years from now, we're going to be right at that 50% with this model of keeping it flat. If we were to reduce the levy and take it down, we would see that we would get to that 50% sooner. And Andrew's model would show us just how soon that would happen. Would it be 28? Would it be 27? We don't know at the moment, but it's somewhere in there. And that would likely have an impact on what decision we would want to make regarding future levies sooner than later. I think what we're anticipating, I'm sorry, my computer seems to be freezing up a little bit. Are you all able to continue to hear me and see what's going on? Some of you all are freezing.
Yes,
We're okay?
Fine for.
Okay, all right.
And Anthony, thank you. That's precisely what I think I wanted to articulate, that I think that now our trustees could see, and we can understand the support that it takes by seeing this projection, by seeing this modeling. Anthony, there was another, and perhaps you brought it up and I just didn't see the full sheet. There was another scenario that was brought up that we were able to see the breakdown of the percentage on how it would impact the Wilmette taxpayer. There was a range, I believe it was like a range of it showed the actual payment that a taxpayer would make and how it would impact.
John,
I think it was
Tracy,
on a
do you remember?
spreadsheet.
Christina, was it included with this document? Is that correct? Or was it with another document?
I believe
Oh,
it,
I found it.
Is it on the website?
Was it the last page of the revenue CPI change impact?
I'm not able to toggle back to my,
Okay, I'm gonna hold this up. Is this it? Where's my camera?
yes. So is it page, by any chance, is it?
It's the last page of the last document last time. Oh, it is. It's the very last page. Still,
Maybe 23 then?
it's the very last page, 22. It's that one.
It's this one. Is this the Wilmette, the average impact to us?
You know, I'm not sure. I can't answer that for confidence as to what this.
I'm afraid I don't know how to read this.
Okay.
I don't, this isn't the same page that you showed me, Tracy, is it?
It is, but I showed you one from the last time, and the one from this time is exactly the same.
Oh,
I believe, Anthony,
Apologize.
you could correct me if I am wrong, and anyone else here. I believe by keeping it flat, and I actually pulled my old tax records, I believe the impact to us as taxpayers is the portion of our taxes that goes to the library will stay approximately, not for sure, approximately the same. So the impact to the taxpayers, well, they should not see an increase, a significant, there might be a little bit of fluctuation, can't say for sure, to their tax bill. Anthony, is that a correct statement?
I think it is. That would also be a question that we could pose to our auditor when they make their presentation at our October 19th meeting. Good to get third parties. We can ask Andrew as well.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions?
I'm curious if anyone has any further thoughts about where we're at with what we're seeing today. I mean, obviously, I mean, the document that we were discussing here is this. So we haven't really talked a lot about what this looks like in particular. But I guess, you know, it is true. I mean, you can totally observe that we've got a levy here for 2021. This last year's approved levy was less than the budget that we had for that year, which is true for the last couple of years. We have levied less than what our budget was. And that is holding true again for this year. As you can see, the proposed levy is showing, I mean, you know, for the line of books, we're actually levying $50,000 less. I don't want you to get into the weeds too much about the detail there, because for all intents and purposes, these general fund expenditures are all one big pot, essentially. The levy does not distinguish the line items that we've identified. For our purposes, we want to make sure the one thing that you will see that remains consistent is the personnel line. We've always kept the personnel line in these documents exactly for what we're budgeting for, because we have a commitment to compensate the team. So that's one of the lines that we hold fast. But the bottom line is that this is all one big pot in the general fund. And yes, these numbers are not going to be completely trued up. We do hold fast with our ask for the special funds that are down here for the same reason that we've got some commitment with those. We've kept them consistent. Our fund balances on those lines, I think, are a critical detail to keep track of as well. And that's why we always reflect that information here for you. We try to keep 50% fund balance in each one of those lines as well to make sure that we're always going to meet our obligations. But this document, it is entirely true that we are below budget in what we're asking for in the levy, that there is deficit spending. But we do have the money in the bank, and we're going to be able to meet our expenditures and meet budget. So my question,
Just,
yeah, please, Tracy, go ahead.
but just one comment to make, gets back to me. So the levy that we're proposing though is not going to pay for the next year's budget. That levy will pay for the budget in 2024. Technically, even though it's all the same now. Okay.
Technically. But as for illustrative purposes, we show you what a current budget is, and some of these numbers will likely increase, obviously.
Yes.
And there
Yes,
may in
thank you.
fact be some line items in a future budget that are not accounted for in here.
But there's, I think this has been helpful because there's always the ones that you pointed out that remain steadfast versus some variation up or down, plus or minus. But some you have kept that you know, as in the personnel, remain the same, correct? Then, okay,
Right.
that was helpful. Okay, thank you.
I mean, that's I guess a little bit about how we formulate this document. Those are some of the factors that we keep in mind. Other questions, comments? So I think it sounds to me like what we want to do is to update the modeling document again to reflect an example of what a reduction might look like. So I think we can prepare that for you. Is there anything else that we can do for you for the October board meeting?
Anthony, if I may ask of the breakdown of how it would the percentage of property taxes for the average or for a range of Wilmette taxpayers, and the breakdown that goes to the Wilmette Library. That was something I thought was helpful last year.
So like what's on the library finance page on the
It's on
website?
The webpage, yep.
Tina, do you mean
Maybe that was already the plan, but
in relation to also from the other entities? Is that what you also had envisioned? Or just the library that you're asking for?
I think it was just on the library. If you prefer, more of a breakdown, but I think it was just towards the library. What percentage goes to the library? I think it was a dollar amount that ended up going to the library.
For the average taxpayer?
There is no average.
I had like a range. I wish I could pull up. I can't toggle between. I think it said something like if the Wilmette taxpayer plays between or pays 10 or 20,000 a year approximately, we had the dollar amount. We had it broken down.
Because Anthony, I believe a couple of us gave you our tax bill, and I think that's what was used to show that range, because there's no real average, I don't think. But I think what you were doing was showing some examples based on our actual tax bills that we had sent you. Is that correct? Or
I mean, that
'cause
would
it's
be
hard
how
to
we would
get it.
calculate that. Yes. So,
Yeah.
that's a good way to, see an illustration of that. We have a new website today, and we're still getting some information posted on that and resolving some of the links. And I'm having a stumble here trying to get this page up so that I can show you what the financial page looks like. So give me just 1 second, but I want to show this to you. I need to share a different page with you. So give me 1 second.
So Anthony, while you're doing that, would it be premature to see basically where the committee's thoughts are in terms of keeping the levy flat or not? Just a round table poll as to where everybody is feeling on the committee?
I think that's a good idea, Lisa.
Okay. Would anyone like to go?
Yeah.
I would go first if you want. I like the idea of keeping it, would approve a flat levy based on, as I spoke up before, of all the reasons keeping the, chipping away at the general fund, the transfer of the special reserve fund, which whatever amount we determine, and getting into with the policy, the financial policy. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm for keeping a flat tax because basically, I don't want to ever have to go to a referendum because there's quite a bit of cost in going to referendum. But also, I think even though we're going to be doing a strategic plan looking at 3 years out, I think there's a lot of the great unknown. I also know that in terms of looking at capital expenditures, Anthony's running out of space for some of the employees. And I think eventually you're going to have to do some type of evaluation of the space and utilization of the space, which is going to cost money, which would be funded by the capital expenditures. And I think I'm comfortable with a 1 year balance. I know we can go anywhere from 6 months to 1 year, but I think we'll get pretty quickly to a 1 year balance. So those are my reasons why I'm in favor of the flat tax. And I think in terms of looking at the budget, it's pretty conservative. And I know it fluctuates, it never comes quite in, but anytime I'm happy with plus or minus 5% based on my experience in corporate America, because that's generally the range that most people look at.
I agree with Lisa. I like your assessment. I'd go flat. My second or third flat.
This is Marianne O'Keefe. My gut says flat for all of the reasons outlined here. That was very helpful to have it enumerated that before fiscal year 29, we wouldn't need a referendum. And that's helpful for me to kind of hear that information, but my gut at this point is to keep it flat.
Thank you. I agree. I would like to see a bit more of for illustrative purposes, what would happen to our modeling, whether it be through discussion, further discussion, or maybe just on my own meeting, maybe with Anthony or John. But in general, I think that we can afford deficit spending. I appreciate knowing that we've got a sufficient amount in our general fund right now. And our budget discussions, I think, have been very worthwhile. I think it's very helpful to know what we have ahead of us, salary-wise and capital outlay-wise. And I think spending from the general fund is beneficial in that it will help us stay in line with our policy. And, other than that, I think my questions were really just the modeling. And I think Anthony and Tracy did a good job, of course, today in helping me. And thank you, John, as well, for helping me understand that. I think maybe going forward, I would like to try to meet with you if you have time to just give me a bit more of that, maybe playing around with that modeling a little bit more.
Sure, that's great. We've also got trustees Nealon and Wolf on our call here today. And I wonder, do either of you feel like you want to comment on this? Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share?
I also support the flat tax levy this year, or 2022. And this whole financial planning effort for the past few months has been really helpful, I think, in understanding. I think communicating this to the curious and interested public might be a bit of a challenge, but I think that we should do it. We should make an effort to put together a piece or like a sort of a special presentation on our website, maybe a little bit of something in the newsletter that explains this carefully. step by step, and it would have to be in, what's the word? Regular English. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
And my thoughts are to keep the levy flat as is. I always, when we have these discussions over the years, I always think of someone who's trying to take a plane and then trying to descend with that plane. And if that descent is comparable to lowering the levy and going below our budget needs, sometimes when you lower that plane, you can't bring it back up or even steady it at the point you want to. And so it's always, I think there's a very fine line that we're always trying to accomplish here. And by keeping it steady, we're doing something that's safe for the library and by extension safe for the community. As Lisa pointed out, there are unexpected expenses that come up and things like that. And then the other thing along the lines of what Trish just said, and I think also what Fina said, I think the example on the website to show the community, it's great to show right now that it's 4% of the tax dollar that goes to the library. If we could also quantify it by for every $1,000 of property taxes at the current levy, it's X amount of dollars. And if we were to lower the levy by a percentage or whatever way we would quantify that, I think the dollar amount is very small. That the changes are very small. And I think so we spend a lot of time talking about this and it's important to do so. But I think it's also, if we can in some way further clarify or visualize the actual dollar amount of the levy going down or up, we'll see the community will see that it's not a lot of money that we're talking about. And really where the real expense comes in, this is my last comment, and so this is Elisa's point again, if we have to go to levy, if we run into a situation where we're in a net borrowing situation, that's going to cost the library and the community a lot more money than the things we're trying to carefully navigate right now.
I do think the modeling will show us, though, that it doesn't happen for several years from now. So the modeling is, that's why I feel I was kind of honing in on it, because I think it's important for the committee to understand that it will be down the road. You know, we know way ahead of time whether we're going to go into referendum.
But I agree that we should do the modeling. But my point is, once you start that descent, you can't always pull that. You can't always pull up from that descent. And so even though we have modeling that shows what the expense might be, there's not a guarantee we can actually get to the number that's modeled. We might end up at a lot lower number, a lot more difficult number to operate from. And that's so the modeling is good. I agree with you, Fina. We should definitely do it. But at least let's understand, you know, if we're moving this plane, how much we're really possibly saving the community if it works out the way it models versus reality. You know, that's what, as I said, reality sometimes does not cooperate with modeling, and so we need to keep that into consideration, I think. So,
and I thanks Stuart for the analogy, because I think that it makes headlines, but in reality, it's not being a good steward of the community's money, because further down the road, if you have to get back to where you were, so to speak, what's the purpose? So I think holding steady is more prudent than trying to be sensational. But that line, Anthony, that you've highlighted, I think that is tangible, and that, again, we have seen over the years, and I'm not sure where, maybe from Trustee Rogers' examples of the, I think residents can relate to that. So that's useful.
You know, and I don't know if thank you. And I don't know that 15,000 is an average tax bill for our community, but I think, you know, give or take, this is kind of the figure that you're looking at. This actual illustration that we've got in front of us here needs to be updated, because in fact, this was true in 2018-19 when we developed this graphic. However, in the last couple of years, because we have held things flat, we're actually, other districts have raised their levies either with CPI, or there have been other changes that have relatively affected our position. So we're not 4%, we're more like 3.5 or 3. And so, you know, the decisions that other taxing bodies make affect this particular, this model of trying to illustrate what portion of the tax bill we are when you talk about portion. So anyway.
I was just gonna say, I've seen this also, I think we all have, when the village puts out a community, like in their newsletter, The Communicator, the same kind of thing. Bob Alinsky always referred to this. So, but that's, I haven't seen an update recently. So it might be interesting to see you know, if the village has updated this.
So Anthony, do you need a couple tax bills and you'll keep them private just as you need, or do you get them from somewhere else?
I think that would be really helpful. I think
Send it to you.
to be
Yeah.
able to base it off of my elected officials' tax bills. So if you would be willing to provide me a copy, white out your personal information on there. You can drop it off in print, you know, if you want to keep it anonymous, however you want to do it. But I think that would be really helpful for us to put together our communications about, you know, some averages to use actual examples would be really helpful. And yes, it's true. Lisa and Ron had provided those to us previously for these illustrative purposes.
No,
Happy to
I
do
did
that.
this. I was happy to do it. I actually just printed a couple of past years of mine, which you can get off the website. So if you don't have them handy, and it's a very easy way to see there's a dollar and it's a percentage of where each person, how much you're paying and what a percentage of your total bill. So if you pull your fall bills.
And maybe you include a link of,
Sorry.
and maybe you include a link so if they want to look at it, they can go to the tax portal and see exactly on that website so they can actually see what they're paying.
That's true. And I just stopped sharing my screen there. It is on our website. We've had that on that financial page. I'll share this with you again. As you can see here at the bottom, we provide a link to the Cook County tax portal. We could provide a little bit more of a reference to explain why you might want to go to such a thing, but we try to give you access to all this here on this page.
Oh, that's good, the way you got it looking. I've not seen that. Thanks. So where do we go
That's
from
other
here?
new-
Thank you, Ann.
Is that the new, Anthony, from the
Could I
new
ask one more question?
site?
New website. Yes, go ahead, Tina.
Are we able to connect that for our October meeting? One of your questions was how can we help, or if there is something that we can add for our October public meeting? Can we add some type of illustration or, you know, a screenshot of something that can help us connect it to the levy? So how the levy, this discussion, you know, this decision for us to keep it flat will impact an average tax payment. I believe we had this during our last levy discussion at the Finance Committee around this time last year. That's what I was trying to get back to. We can talk about this offline. I don't have my sheets in front of me, so.
Yeah, by all means, if there are some illustrations, if there are documents, if there are ways that we can make this easier for you to present this information and to discuss this, I'm more than happy to do whatever we can to get this information presented. So there's a couple steps I think that we need to take. Obviously, there's some homework that we can do with document preparation and so on to help illustrate the decisions that you want to make here. I do think it's important to recap what we've just said. So we have all 7 of our board members on the call here today. I want to thank you all for being here with us and for sharing in this conversation. I see that we have, I believe I'm hearing unanimous support across all 7 trustees to move forward with the proposal of a flat levy for this fall's levy process. Is that correct?
Do you need a
Yes.
motion?
I was
Well,
gonna say, would you,
not necessarily. I guess I want to just summarize what I've heard so far. So I guess that's what I'm hearing here. We do have a legal obligation with the county to file our levy by December. And we typically have approved our levies in October and November. One of our objectives, looking at our financial audits historically, has been for you all to receive your audited financials for the previous fiscal year before you have to make a decision about your levy. Now, our previous auditor was not able to meet that expectation that I had when I first started here. Our new auditor is able to do so. The auditor is going to be presenting last fiscal year's data to us at this month's meeting on October 19th. So it would be my wish, or it was my design, that you wouldn't take action on your levy at the October meeting. We can look at a draft version of it. We can continue this conversation. If there's further refinement, if there's further public comment, that would give us a little bit more time to prepare documentation, to better educate ourselves about the process, to consult our third party, whoever our consultants are that we want to give any further information from, and prepare more communications. And then we can take our official action at the November meeting and still meet our obligations with the county before the December deadline. Does that sound like a reasonable approach for us to take? Even though it's at the moment, it sounds like we're unanimous in this decision, this would give us time to do better communications with the public about what we're doing. I see a few nods. Yeah.
Yes.
Aye is what I wanted to say. For sure, Anthony, I'm on board.
Okay. Lisa?
So there's no need to inform the public like maybe a month in advance before we actually take the action in November that we're looking at a flat levy, and how would that communication? I'm just asking.
I think what we do is, this is an agenda item for our October 19th meeting, and we reiterate the process that we've discussed here today in summary of our finance committee meeting. I mean, obviously we can provide a summary, and our plan at every board meeting is to summarize our finance, or our committee meetings rather. But we can make this an agenda item for discussion. We can provide further illustrative documents like the ones that we've looked at here today. Certainly more than that single page that was up on the page for this meeting, but provide a lot more background information, have the same kind of discussion that we're having here today. And then anything that comes to light in the course of the next 2 weeks can help to further reinforce that conversation. But you know, to the point of, you know, what are our obligations in terms of our communication and whatnot. It's weird. We hold a hearing for, regardless of what our decision is regarding the budget and appropriation ordinance, that is a requirement that we have a hearing. But the only time we ever have a levy hearing is if you're going to be raising your levy. So that doesn't do a very good job of informing the community about what your planning process is and all of that. Our attorney and I tend to agree that that's pretty silly. The B&A is certainly not the one that needs more attention than the levy. But I think we've bought ourselves about a month of time for communication by receiving the audit earlier than we have historically. And that gives us a little bit more time to prepare our documents for a November vote. So if that's okay with you all, I think we'll proceed with that plan. And we'll prepare more documentation for our October meeting.
I think that sounds great, Anthony.
Okay. All right.
So we have completed the discussion of the tax levy, and no action will be taken at this meeting, correct? Is there any action item that we need to take?
There is not.
Okay. I will conclude that discussion. Is there any new business or old business? I don't think so. All right.
Tracy, one item I guess I would ask is, does the committee feel like we need to hold another committee meeting before either the October board meeting or the November board meeting? Or is that something that we want to determine maybe at the October board meeting to decide if there's anything that comes to light in conversation then before we take the vote in November?
I would defer to decide at the October board meeting if we need to meet.
Right. I
Okay.
agree.
Yeah, keep it open.
I would keep it, yeah, open. I would really, I actually prefer meetings just because I think sometimes it's easier to have these discussions rather than email, trying to follow like an email chain. I think it spurs other people's questions and other people's comments are really helpful to hear. So I'd be open to another meeting. Short.
But after we learn more, if there's anything more, not just as to Anthony's point, we don't need another meeting scheduled right now. Correct?
Would be helpful. I think it'd be helpful to make one, I think, knowing,
No.
I don't think our change, the
Not until
audited.
we learn more from what the auditor, I don't think so.
I don't have a
Like
feeling.
after- Lisa suggested after the October meeting. We have nothing else right now, I think, to gain
Do
from
we want to
scheduling
build
another
some
meeting.
consensus on what we'd like to present to the public regarding the levy?
I believe based on our conversation, maybe I'll summarize a little bit, Fina. In the next meeting in October, we'll get a copy of the audited financial statement, and we will discuss as a group, a little bit about the tax levy. We will not make a decision of any type in the October meeting because we will have just gotten the audited financial statement. So between the October and the November meeting, if we feel as a group based on any modeling or further, then we would schedule a further finance committee meeting to discuss based on what we've learned in the next October meeting. We won't approve the levy until November. It won't be done before October. Does that sound reasonable?
That makes sense, Tracy.
Fina, are you good with
Okay.
that, Fina?
I think we're saying the same thing. Yeah.
It didn't sound like that though, Fina, from before. So I appreciate Tracy's reiteration of that. I'm in agreement with that. But that's why I'm saying I didn't hear that from you before.
I'm open to a meeting. If we schedule it after our October discussion, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Want to put a tentative date on the calendar for a potential finance committee meeting following up on the October meeting, on the October library board meeting? And then that way we have a tentative date.
I'm definitely open to that.
I don't think it's necessary right now.
Easier to send a doodle poll out.
Sure, I can send
Right.
a doodle poll.
That's more
Right.
efficient.
It's a
I
better
think.
use of time. It's 12. Right.
Thank you.
I move to adjourn the meeting. Are we there?
We are.
I second it.
It is 12:13. The motion to adjourn the meeting made by trustee Fishman, seconded by trustee McDonald. Anthony, do we do a roll call or just a hand raise?
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay,
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all.
thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy, for running a good meeting.